We welcome you to the Welton Design Challenge RFP Conference. And we want to first make sure that everyone had an opportunity to sign in outside and make sure that you print it legible. You'll be added to a distribution list, and so if there are any additional addendums that would be released on behalf of the RFP, we just want to make sure that we have your email address and that you would be included on any additional information. So if you haven't done so, please make sure at the end of the evening that you revisit the sign-in table and add your information. We'd also like to extend a thank you to the Five Points Business District, to Tracy Winchester and Nell Washington for hosting tonight's event. So we thank them very graciously for the space. And I will just let you know this is a very informal process. My name is Nicole Edwards. I'm with the City and County of Denver Office of Economic Development, and I actually work in the Contracts Performance Management Unit, and I'm the RFP coordinator for this actual RFP. Tonight is very informal, and what we're coming together with you is just to be able to provide you information. And so what I'd like to do is share with you how tonight would go. So what we'll do is we'll give you some background information in regard to some highlights within the RFP. We just want to ensure that we're giving you the information about the addendums, that we're sharing with you the organization of the RFP, your due dates, and so forth. And then we'll open it up to our Executive Director, Paul Washington. He'll be able to give you more of an overview and expectations for the proposals for the challenge, and then we will save some time at the end, so that we can do questions and answers. So I would ask that you would allow him to complete his presentation and hold all of your questions to the end, and then he will be able to address those at the end of the evening. Okay? One of the things I would point out to you, there has been an extension to the RFP. Originally, it was due October the 28th at 4 p.m. We have now extended that deadline to December the 2nd. There is an addendum. It is addendum number 3 that was released, which announced tonight's event, as well as the extension to the RFP. There have been 2 addendums. The first addendum was the question and answers, and that was as a result of questions that people sent in after the first week of the release of the RFP. And we actually responded to all of those questions, and we also, at that time, there was a similar conference that was held at the Blair Caldwell Research Library, and so we released the names of all of those attendees in the effort, or if anyone wanted to partner with other residents, developers, architects, and so forth. So that was in Addendum 1. Addendum 2, we released a sample application for you, which was a demonstration, which is in all of your packets this evening, and a sample of the expectations so that you could build your proposal similar to that style. And then number 3, again, was the extension. I would point out to you that when you submit your proposal, please be sure to acknowledge all of the addendums as they're released. You'll notice at the bottom of every addendum, there is an area for the contractor to initial and submit with their RFP, and that's your acknowledgement that you were aware of any changes that took place during this process. I would also like to share with you, as you're submitting your RFP, you may have it couriered in, or you may hand deliver it. I want to make note that when you bring it in on December 2nd, if you choose to hand walk it into the web building, 4 o'clock is the cutoff. So I really want to encourage you to take the time and think about parking downtown, as well as our security. So I'm including taking off your shoes, your belt, all of the different things that could help you to lose 5 or 10 minutes in the process. I don't want you to get upstairs at 4:05, which, if we're holding to the integrity of the RFP, we would not be able to accept your proposal. So those may seem like really small details, but day of they'll be really large for someone that's up against security. So please keep those things in mind as you're coming down to deliver your proposal. It should be sealed and in an envelope. You can do a box, however you choose to do it, but it does need to be sealed for the integrity of your proposal. Okay? Let's see. We would also bring to your attention that it would behoove you to make sure that you're registered on the SAM system, which is www.sam.gov. We also encourage you to have your CCR and your DUNS registration up to date, and that way, if you're one of the finalists and you're selected and you would be awarded, this would help to expedite your contract development process, because all of those forms and that status is required to do business with the City of Denver. We will also verify your current registration of the Secretary of State. Okay? Lastly, I would talk to you about city obligations. We would want to make sure that you are current on all of your taxes on all parcels that are associated to your ownership. And we would also be looking to make sure that you're current on any and all loans with the city and county of Denver. This can definitely make you ineligible for the process. Okay, and there's also, you can refer to your RFP in section B2, and there you will see the specifics of the program, and that would be your scope of work. And there's also a sample agreement of the contract that you would be entering into with the city and county of Denver, and that would include any insurance requirements and so forth. Okay, at this time, we will turn it over to Paul Washington.
Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
My name is Paul Washington. I'm the Director of the Office of Economic Development. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge not only Nicole, who always does fine work, but also Ewa, who I work with in the background, and then my good friend James Busby, who I work with at the Office of Economic Development. I think most of you know James. And then finally, I just want to acknowledge and thank Tracy for all of your leadership and support in this important corridor. So thank you for having me here today, Tracy. I'm just going to briefly go through a presentation that I pulled together several months ago, frankly, on the Welton Challenge, and give you a little bit of context. My whole purpose of the meeting today is to, I think, give some sense of the application, benchmark, if you will, and run through what we thought would be a pretty good sample application, because I think there were a lot of questions about what should be submitted for proposal. And then more importantly, I wanted to talk about what the intent of the Welton Challenge is. And the Welton Challenge, frankly, came out of some meetings and discussions we had been having with significant property owners along Welton, and I know Ada was part of these discussions. What we are really attempting to do is to not only demonstrate the capabilities of the Welton corridor, but provide property owners with an added incentive to collaborate with professionals to come together and come up with a proposal that could be financed, whether that's with Dura or whether that's with private capital or private investors. And so the Welton Challenge sprung from that. And everyone asked me, well, what is your ultimate goal for the Welton Challenge? And frankly, it's a significant amount of money for this type of project. My ultimate goal for the Welton Challenge is to have significant developments along Welton. Eventually, I want a crane on Welton Street. Once I see a crane on Welton Street, I'm going to do the happy dance and tell the mayor that I deserve some time off. So that's where all this is heading, if you will. So I'm going to just start with, I've been thinking about 5 points for the last 2 years since I started this position. And the four criteria here are, in my estimation, the biggest challenges to full development of the Welton corridor. And I know none of this is news or surprising to any of you, but Welton, in my opinion, lacks a critical mass of jobs and density to support retail activity. I really think that the density will precede retail development. And so therefore, a lot of what we are focused on is how do we increase not only the amount of rooftops, but also the amount of jobs along Welton Street. We're very, very happy with the progress that's being made with the United Way headquarters that's happening along 20th in Welton. We were part of that deal, and that is an effort to create more job activity along the corridor. And we hope that the Welton Challenge will start to address some of that. Secondly, there are no unique anchor destinations to date of significant scale. And so we really, really are trying to encourage more retail and destination retail along Welton Corridor, whether that's a jazz venue or restaurants or hotels or shopping, something that really plays to Denver's strengths in retail. And one of Denver's biggest strengths in retail is the opportunity to provide an authentic, urban, chic experience. There's no other city in this region that can provide that type of retail experience. And the urban, chic, authentic retail experience happens primarily in the most mature neighborhoods, and then of course 5 Points is smack in the center of that definition. So I think having unique anchor retail destinations makes all the sense in the world. Lack of significant private investment is the third area. We feel as if the Welton Challenge will help alleviate that by providing property owners with the pre-development cost to come to a private investor or lender and have a legitimate proposal that can be financed. And that's what the Welton Challenge is designed to do, to provide property owners with the resources to hire their professionals so that you can go before DURA and get TIF financing, or you can go before a lender or an investor and have a legitimate application, something that has architectural designs, that has market analysis, that has engineering reports, all of that, and pro formas, all the information you would need to get the financing for development. And then finally, the infrastructure challenges. We understand that there are drainage issues on Welton. We understand that the two-way traffic impedes some healthy congestion for retail. We also understand the light rail is too close to the storefront. These are significant issues. The Welton Challenge is not designed to resolve those issues, but we feel as if the more retail, the more housing, and the more job activity we have along the corridor will then give much more justification for the expenses to be incurred to resolve these infrastructure challenges. And so these are not beyond our understanding, but we feel as if development needs to occur in order to justify the infrastructure investments. This is a map of the Welton Challenge corridor. In essence, we're looking at development along Welton from 20th and Welton to 30th and Downing primarily. We will likely expand our development focus to other areas outside of Welton, but the Welton Challenge is really designated for the Welton corridor. Next slide, please. I talked a little bit about the goals, but formally, we want to provide property owners with pre-development capital to develop a sophisticated and comprehensive plan to seek development financing. The whole goal, again, of the Welton Challenge is to give property owners the resources to hire the architects, to hire the engineers, to hire the designers, and the finance individuals to come up with the pro forma, the architectural plans, the market analysis, so that you can get the financing needed to develop your property. We also want to encourage property owners to partner with experienced developers, urban design architects, and retailers. That, in our estimation, is a very important component to the full development of this corridor, is to get as many sophisticated minds dealing on these individual transactions as possible. And again, the pre-development dollars from the Welton Challenge is to finance and to pay for these experienced professionals. Of course, we want to honor the heritage and culture of the 5 Points District. So as you think about the utilization of your property, I think making sure that you are sensitive to and help promote the cultural heritage of this corridor is extremely important. And then finally, one of the things that we want to accomplish is no matter what happens, there will be an event where the best proposals are going to be showcased. I have in my mind an audience of 60 or more of the top developers in the region, the top bankers, the top property investors in the area, and then we will present the proposals that are being considered. And I think at the very least, when we put up these displays and when we have the property owners talk about their vision of development of their property, it will send a strong signal to that community, that the developer, the investor, and the policymakers about the total potential of Welton. Because you will see all of these plans, we'll see all of this thinking, we'll see all of this engagement, and I think folks will walk away thinking, wow, there is a lot here. And so that is really the overall intent, is to show what's possible on this corridor. And finally, we want to catalyze the redevelopment and revitalization of Welton. It's in our economic development strategy for 2 years in a row. I guarantee you it will be in our economic development strategy for 2014 and beyond. It's a key area of focus, and we will continue to put as much effort and resources into this corridor as is appropriate. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the fourth and fifth slides because it's in your RFP, but I do want to just highlight what the intent of these. Are we missing one?
Yes.
That's all right.
There you go.
That's okay. The application requirements are really threefold. No worries. And basically, we tried to design the Welton Challenge to address three types of property owners. First and foremost, the little guy, if you will. I grew up getting my hair cut on 5 Points at this small little barber shop, and I had them in mind. I didn't want to exclude the opportunity for a small property owner to say, you know what, I'm fine putting a boutique shoe store here, or some type of really unique retail or restaurant or whatever they think is appropriate. And so we didn't want to leave out the small property owner. And so that's category one. And that's the 18 lineal foot category. Category two is a single property owner of land that could be developed into at least 2,250 leasable square feet. And that's for the average kind of mid-sized property owner on Welton. And you know, this applies to anyone who has that type of scale that wants to develop their property accordingly. And then the third category is an attempt to encourage multiple property owners to come together and think about how they may put forth their property towards development and combine their property that is contiguous. There's got to be a shared wall or property line so that we can have scale of development, and that's very critical for the Welton redevelopment, is to have some sense of development scale. It'd be great to have a small little, one-off development opportunity, but we want to have catalytic development. And so category three is for that. Multiple property owners that come together and say, you know what, let's contribute our property together, let's develop this together into something that has some significant scale, and that's the multiple property owners of lots holding above 35,000 square feet. So in a nutshell, those are the three categories. You're encouraged to apply in one or two of them as long as you meet the criteria, but the sense is category one is for the small guy, category two is for everyone else, and category three is for multiple property owners with scale. Next slide. Oh, and the other thing, I won't touch on some of the wonky metrics, but we do have some specific metrics that you will need to accomplish, basically to make sure that the development occurring or proposed to occur meets the job performance requirements, meets some retail activity requirements, so that we don't get a bunch of development that just doesn't make economic sense for the city and county of Denver, since we're putting forth these resources. And so you want to pay attention to that in your pro forma to make sure that you demonstrate, at least in your best estimation, that the property development satisfies the retail. I think we have jobs per lineal square foot and retail revenues per square foot. And so as you work through your pro formas, just be sensitive to make sure you hit those criteria, because that's going to be a key factor in our evaluation. The next slide is the application, and here's where I want to spend a little bit more time. I've listed here the components to the application. I'm going to start from the bottom up, and then if we can, Nicole, maybe go to the application in a second. But the first is, please spend some time with the 5 Points vision plan, the 5 Points district vision plan and implementation strategy, and the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods plan, and make sure that your proposed development is in concurrence or is in concert with those three planning efforts. We want to make sure that whatever you're proposing is consistent with what the community and the community efforts have been to demonstrate or to speak as to what they want along the corridor. And if it's housing, it should be market rate housing. If it's commercial development, it's got to be sensitive to those planning efforts. And then so if we could just go to the sample application. This is something that James and his team worked hard to put together, because one of the questions I was getting is, well, this seems like it's going to take a long time, or I don't know if I want to put forth the resources to even put forth an application. So what I did is, I had James focus in bringing the team together, and we just took some of the, components of an application and put them in a sample application just to give folks a visual representation of what we think an application would look like. So that's a beautiful cover. You can use your artistic designs on what cover you want, but that's my best guess at it. We can go to slide 2. So the first component are artist renderings. Now I realize that these are really well done ones, and they're done by a professional architect, and you may or may not want to expend those resources, but we do want some type of artist rendering. What is this development going to look like? So that will be the first thing, and of course that was done by a professional. The second is a massing, and we try to provide good examples of massings. Again, this is a different project, but something that shows what the street level view will look like and how this will incorporate with the surrounding building. Some type of demonstration of how the street level view will look. So again, a different project. We just pulled some massings from prior deals that crossed our desk, but this is an example of a massing. A conceptual write-up. Here, I couldn't do a conceptual write-up because I didn't have a conceptual project, but I tried to give the table of contents, if you will. Obviously, we want a description of the project, the location of the project, how we'll address the market need, the amenities of the project, kind of key features, and then how it's consistent with the 3 plans I just mentioned. And then just a write-up of that. And again, I'm not talking about volumes and reams of information. 2 pages would be more than enough of just describing how this development is consistent with the plans, what are the features, if it's a housing development, how many 1 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, how many 3 bedrooms, are they going to have granite, is it going to be LEED, you know, just kind of stuff that gives us a sense of this project. And just so you all know, this application comes across our desk weekly. And developers come in and they come in with the 5-page, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, and guess what, I'm gonna come back to you for funding in a month, right? And that's all this is, just to give us a sense, something that we can evaluate on a one-on-one-off basis. Next slide, please. So we try to, again, describe a particular project. Feel free to use as much of that language as you want, but just to give you a sense of how the write-up is, and as you can see, you know, it's not that complicated. It doesn't have to be all that detailed, but enough that you're competing for up to $175,000. So we do want to have some sense of how we can evaluate it. Next slide, please. And again, this is a retail project. And as I mentioned, there's some metrics in the RFP, and in that last section, job creation, is that metric, right? We try to talk about what job creation, the revenues per square foot, but you can see the write-up does not have to be very exhaustive, but you know, a couple pages I think will be more than sufficient to articulate your project. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Here is an important component. We are asking for a letter of interest or a demonstrated capability of the property owner in 4 key categories: developer, architect, leasing agent, and general contractor. Now, the property owner may, him or herself, be a developer, and if that's the case, they just need to describe why they have that capability and maybe what projects they've done in the past. But if that capability does not reside with the property owner, all we're asking them to do is to identify partners in the developer, architect, leasing agent, and general contractor community. We try to provide a very straightforward letter of participation or letter of interest. And what we're trying to force is your effort to start to identify, if you were to get this pre-development grant, who you would have on this project. And all we're asking for is the identification of that agent, and then them demonstrating on their letterhead that, yes, if you get this Welton Challenge grant, I would work on this project, because ultimately you're going to need these resources to go after the real money, and the real money being the money that will develop this property eventually. And so if you don't have relationships in any one of these areas, please feel free to contact Tracy. I'm sure she'd be happy to provide you with a list of resources. Obviously, you can ask your attorneys or great contacts for referrals, as well as your commercial banking relationship. But needless to say, we're really looking for some indication that you've at least identified a potential team you're going to work with. Next slide, please. draft financing plan. This might be one of the more intimidating slides for less sophisticated property owners. And so we tried to come up with a very basic pro forma. In essence, what you're trying to do is just make some reasonable assumptions as to the revenue and profitability of this project. And we tried to keep it at a very high level, just use this as a format, if you will, but we're looking for the revenue, some vacancy assumptions, how they will ramp up, and then some expense assumptions. That's all we're really looking for in this, so that we can get a sense of how this will perform in your estimation. Again, probably more intimidating than it looks, but if you really read through this, it can be done in an afternoon on Excel spreadsheet, quite simply, because once you get the first column, anyone who's done any modeling knows that a lot of that is just feeds off of that first column with some basic assumptions on growth, vacancy, and expenses. And again, our office, Tracy's office, could be a resource if you're having trouble trying to work through this, but this will be a great model for you to use, and we'd be happy to share the Excel version of this with you via Tracy Winchester upon request. Next slide, please. Sources and uses, a little bit easier, but it's important for you to articulate if you were to get full financing for this project. Now, this is not for the Welton Challenge, but this is for the full financing of the project, what your sources might be. And obviously, you're not going to have a banker lined up. You may not have your investors lined up, but you could just make a plug. I will get this much in senior lending. I'll get this much in private equity investment. I'll get this much in some other type of loan instrument, and then how that source of capital might be used. I'm gonna have to, paint my building. I'm gonna have to, redevelop the first level for retail, and I may have to, give some rent subsidy to a retail tenant for the first 3 months. I don't know. I don't care. But you should articulate how your sources and uses of capital would be on this full development, and of course they should match. And again, we tried to give you we used some ridiculous, not so ridiculous math, but those are just plug numbers. But the topics or the items are most important. Just things that you would think about if you were to get a capital for development. How much am I going to spend on landscaping? How much am I going to spend on painting the building? How much am I going to spend on refinishing the floors? And you can use these categories as a guide for you. And then finally, the utilization of the funds. Here, what we're trying to understand is with the Welton Challenge money, how does that get you from where you currently are to getting a project where it can be financed? And how does this Welton Challenge address this gap? Because many of you are further along this continuum than others. Some of you property owners may never have really thought about developing your property in a significant way. Others of you are, really close to that thinking, and that's fine. All we're looking for is how this Welton Challenge will get you over the hump so that you can go get financing for your project. And if you're very far along, you need to be careful to say how this money will get you to where you need to be. If you're not very far along, I think the case is very simple. I'm not very far along, and this Welton Challenge will help me to convince these professionals that I got LOIs from that I'll have some money to pay them if they put some real work into this. And so that's kind of what we're looking for, is just how does this Welton Challenge get you from where you are to be fully financed. Again, if you think about the purpose of this, it's to let's say you all in this room have won a Welton Challenge grant. Then what you do after you do the happy dance, then what you do is you say, okay, the OED is going to give me 25% of my grant today, and then they'll give me 75% of my grant once I have made the final step to apply for financing, whether that's going to a bank or to Dura, to some private investors, and put forth a legitimate proposal to finance your project. And in order to do that, you're going to have to get an architect to give you all kind of pretty drawings. You're going to have to probably spend some time on really fleshing out your pro forma financials so that they're defensible. You're going to have some type of engineering and some type of leasing agent to spend some time on market studies, and that's going to cost money, and we recognize that. And that's pre-development costs. And the Welton Challenge is for you to say, I won this grant, so come on board, let's put together together this application for financing, and once we submit that application for financing, 75% of our monies will come and you'll get paid, so that your professional advisors, those folks you're getting LOIs from, aren't taking the financial risk that they put in all this work to develop all these pretty pictures and pro formas, and then you don't get financing, and therefore they don't get paid. This takes that risk out from them, so you can go after the best professionals you can to give you the best shot at getting the financing you're going to need to get your development done. So I think that's it for my presentation. I'm very happy to answer any questions in the limited amount of time we have. I do want to thank you all for spending time with us this evening, and I want to thank the folks on Channel 8 for tuning in, and so we'll open it up for any questions. Yes, sir. And if you could please state your name.
Oh, yeah, definitely. My name is Brandis Meeks, and I'm actually a realtor with Keller Williams Real Estate. My question is just simply land acquisition for some, for me personally, who's not a landowner.
Yes.
So at this point, do you want simply not simply, but do you want the plan, or do you actually want to have a letter of intent from a homeowner, a property owner, as well as the plan?
So, great question. So, you sound like you're a developer in essence. And so if I were in your shoes, this is for property owners. And so what you would want to do is you would want to approach a property owner. I'm assuming you have a property in mind for acquisition. And I think that property owner should submit this application, and you can work out kind of your deal with the property owner, but then they would have you listed as that developer with that LOI. That's perfectly acceptable. But the proposal needs to come on behalf of the property owner, and they can identify you as a developer, and you could be behind the scenes, kind of putting the deal together, but it does need to be formally presented by a property owner. It would just list you as a developer and then the rest of your team.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Well, my name is Michael Markel. I'm
Yes.
a developer.
Yes, nice
and
to meet you,
also-
Michael.
Nice to see you. And I'm a landowner also. And on the challenges, there's some challenges, on Welton Street, that would require city participation, and I'm thinking specifically about drainage.
Sure.
And I didn't know if there's any more information, on those kind of challenges, that we could look into.
Great.
So that we could see how we would integrate in
Sure.
some of those.
Great question. So, unfortunately, you're not going to like the answer. The mayor and, of course, the Office of Economic Development is quite aware of the infrastructure challenges along Welton, as I mentioned, specifically the drainage issue. And we understand that the drainage issue needs to be resolved before significant development occurs along Welton. My theory has always been we need to demonstrate a momentum of investment activity in Welton in order to justify the investment made in that infrastructure. And I know it's a chicken and egg thing, and I know that's the unfortunate position property owners find themselves in, but I do think the Welton Challenge will start to demonstrate that. Trust me, if you have enough development that occurs along Welton, at some point, if the drainage becomes that impediment, then the city will have to make that financial decision. But there is a long list of capital improvement projects that, frankly, are ahead of us in priority because of the financial and fiscal impact. And so we need to change that equation, and I think the more development opportunities we have at Welton, the more we can justify the investments to be made on that corridor. The Office of Economic Development is also looking at some very creative ways to finance infrastructure like that. Primarily through what's called EB5. That's something we're pretty far along in our analysis, and so there may be some opportunities for other sources of capital through public-private partnerships to address some infrastructure issues. I can't promise that that's going to come to fruition, but we're looking at a lot of alternatives.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Yes, Paul, I'm asking this for a property owner who couldn't be here.
Sure.
They wanted to know if they do have an existing loan that's in good standing
Yes.
with OED, and that they are able to, say they're awarded the Welton
Yes.
Challenge, would they still be able to get financial funding for OED as part of their, when you talk about the sources of funding, would they be able to apply for additional funding from OED in the sense of a small interest loan?
Sure.
And is there a maximum of how much you can have in loan programs or packages from OED?
Great question. So the answer is yes. but it's with a big asterisk, right? Like any other development opportunity, we will look at that development opportunity on a one-off basis. And if it's compelling and it's underwritable, if that's a word, then we would certainly look to provide additional financial resources to an existing borrower. But that's going to have to be looked at on a one-off basis, and they need to provide a compelling development opportunity, and we will certainly look at that in due course. So the answer is yes. If you have an existing loan with the Office of Economic Development, as long as you are in good standing and as long as you are current on your tax obligations and you present a compelling development opportunity, we would think seriously about participating in that. Absolutely. Nina.
My question is, how competitive rate between EB5 money and traditional loan?
So this is a pre-development award. So we're at the stage before you go after that type of financing. I think any development is going to be competitive in the sense of trying to attract capital, and so the Welton Challenge is, and again, an attempt to give property owners the financial resources to bring the most adept professionals on their team, so that when they do go out for financing, whether that's EB5 or a commercial loan or to the OED, you're presenting a compelling package that has all that an investor would expect: artist renderings, massings, a justifiable and detailed pro forma, a market analysis, everything that you need to get financing. And frankly, if you are awarded a Welton Challenge grant, that's a bragging right, and I think that gives you some credibility that, look, I competed against all these property owners, and of those, I was given this pre-development grant, so the city thinks there's something here, and I think that can be used to your advantage from a banking perspective. And trust me that this is Welton Challenge version 1.0. If we get some compelling development opportunities, we're going to do all that we can to make sure that those compelling development opportunities and the ones who receive awards are going to get financing to get those projects up. Because like I said, my whole goal is to throw a crane up on Welton Street, because I want to do the happy dance, and I really want to see Albus do the happy dance, which he's promised me he'll do if we get a crane on Welton Street. Yes, sir.
My name is Norman Harris. Can you talk a little bit about the funds that are available and
Great
how
question.
it's going to be allocated between different property owners?
Sure.
Is it a tier, or just talk a little bit about
That is a fantastic question. So I don't know if we can go back to the slide. I'm on page 8, Nicole. Great question, Mr. Harris. So in essence, there are, and I tried to list a few, there are a number of resources available for development along Welton and everywhere else in Denver. A lot come through our office, some come through Dura, and of course there's a private market. I think the most sophisticated developers are going to have some combination of those three at play. So I tried to list them here. There are a number of housing programs that the Office of Economic Development manages. The Welton Challenge monies, just so you know, come from our community development block grants, and those are annual grants that we receive from HUD. The good news is we've received our allocation before the government shut down, so those funds are still available, and they will be allocated to the award winners. We don't know the amounts. I did cap it at $175K. Certainly, the small property owners may get a portion or all of that, but up to $175. And it's just going to be how many projects we think are worthy of funding and how much funding we think they're worthy of. So there may be, we got $500K, so it's probably 3 or 4 projects in there at the very least. Number one. Number two, there are other resources available for a developer through our office and others. And, just for sake of brevity, there's one is a retail triage. I don't know if James has identified Welton yet, but we are focusing on neighborhood corridors that have underutilized retail activity, and that's through a retail triage program. And that's something that James is developing. But the basic notion there is to look at neighborhood corners that have underserved in retail opportunity and provide some resources to shore that up, whether that's helping the property owner design or come in contact with individuals that can help them address the retail shortage. We have a small business lending fund. I know a number of folks along Welton are familiar with this, but that's where my office loans money to small businesses and at very attractive interest rates, very junior capital, very patient capital, and so that's available for business creation as long as you can demonstrate one job created for every 35,000 borrowed is another program. A number, as I mentioned, in housing. I talked about the CDBG program, but we also have a single-family rehabilitation program where we offer loans for development of individual homes, probably not the most appropriate here. We also have housing programs out of our home funding, and basically here we provide down payment assistance, or we provide capital for nonprofits that provide down payment assistance, and then also we provide operational support for those same organizations. And then finally, we have a HOPWA program for housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. Not a lot there for the Welton Challenge really to work with, but there are a number of resources out of our office, and I'd be happy to talk to you about the available resources for development. And then, of course, we use CDBG for retail and commercial development, which, as Tracy alluded to, our office manages about $138 million, and we loan monies out for development opportunities if they're compelling, and we'd be happy to look at any development along those lines. And then finally, there is Dura. That has done a study along the Welton, and so it's TIF eligible, which means you can, in essence, borrow against the projected future tax increase of that development, and that's really kind of what we have in the back of our head, is you'd have something that you can go to Tracy Huggins at Dura and say, hey, this is my project. Can I get TIF allocation for that? That's really what we kind of had in our mind as maybe a next step to once you get your Welton Challenge and you get your architectural plans and all that other fancy stuff, you can go after some financing, Dura being maybe one potential stop. Yes, sir.
My name's Riaditan. Hey, this is a very easy one, but this slideshow is really well done and had a lot of information. Is this going to be available on the website by any chance?
I think the answer is yes. And you heard it on Channel 8. He said it was very well done. So I take that as a compliment. We'll certainly make this available to you. Sure, absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir. Mr. Harris.
Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned kind of the ideal funding where groups of property owners are coming together in regards to probably a bigger plan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about any facilitation of that? I know that's probably been a challenge in the past. We're using the 5 Points Business District to try to facilitate some conversation. I know it can be challenging to try to get multiple property owners in the same place kind of talking about development.
And so that's a great question. I'm a little bit hamstrung here because my policemen are looking at me, and so they're telling me I can't get too involved in the matchmaking of this. I certainly would if it were up to my druthers, but I've been told by folks smarter than me that because we're issuing the RFP, that we can't kind of match make, because then if that team gets funding, people will cry foul, and I think that's appropriate. So we can't do a lot to facilitate the matchmaking of this. Again, I think Tracy and her office are probably better suited for that. Frankly, these meetings are also an attempt to kind of get people in the same room to maybe facilitate that discussion. So I can't, and my office cannot play too active of a role in that matchmaking. But suffice it to say, if that matchmaking occurs naturally and a proposal is presented, once that team has been formulated and we feel that that development is worthy, we will, do everything that we can to help facilitate the development of that team, a development of that project sponsored by that team.
Mr. Harris, I would share with you as well, we hosted one conference, and the attendees that were the attendees that were present for that conference, everyone was in agreement for the list of attendees to be released publicly, and that was so that they could basically make those matches. So we will do the same with the sign-in sheet that's here tonight. If there's anyone that objects to their information being released publicly, I would ask that you see me immediately after. Other than that, I would assume that everyone's open to that option, and that's the reason we ask that you print legibly and that you're putting your name as well as the company name and the email address. And if you look in your addendum number 1, it shows you all of the attendees that were at the Blair Caldwell Research Library for the RFP conference number 1. And so that may be potential partners.
And one other thing, where might we find, I think it was mentioned about the city plans, neighborhood development plans. Where do we find that information as far as like the vision?
I think it's an RFP, and it's also, and I shouldn't say this, but it's in the sample application, but I don't think we linked it. So you'll have to literally, copy it, and I think that will work. But it's the website is in the sample application. I just don't think there's a link. You're gonna have to cut and paste it.
So you can go to page 11 of your application, and it's there. You can also go on the website of the 5 Points Business District, and they also have it on their website. And I was also informed today that they also released a newsletter, and so if any of you are on their mailing for that, they've given you all of the addendums as well as all of those reports. So there's several options for you to be able to obtain that information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And, just in closing, the last thing I'll say is that, this is a very unique program. I think it's a recognition of the mayor's focus on this corridor, the fine work that Tracy Winchester and her group have done. And, we typically don't put $500,000 onto the street in pre-development grant opportunities, but we really do believe in this corridor. We really feel like this will help catalyze some development opportunities. But if you look, like tomorrow I'm going to a groundbreaking, the OED has been involved in putting capital that leveraged over $100 million of investment on Brighton Boulevard. And so we're really trying to have that same impact here, where we're first in, we demonstrate the potential, and then our money attracts private capital, and that's really the intent of this. So I encourage you all to put forth your best proposal. Please use our guide as a guide, and at the very least, we will show the potential of the Welton corridor in front of the who's who in the development and finance community. And I suspect that we're going to see a lot of significant development come out of this Welton Challenge. That's the bet. Thank you.